Right, there are a couple of different types of locks. There are doorknobs, padlocks, deadbolts. You've seen all these locks around. The mechanism is all the same. If you look at the transparent padlock in your hand and you look down the front of it, you are seeing exactly that. Behind the scenes, what you're seeing is this. And is this going to work, or am I going to regret this? Hang on, I'm going to try and save my voice. Oh, this is going to work, and I can probably get to the screen. Awesome. So, the red here is the key pin. The blue is the driver pin. The reason why the plug, which is this yellow circle, the reason why it won't turn is because the driver pin is in the way. And that's what stops a lock opening. That simple. This animation is not going to work because it doesn't. It would really be better if we had better Mac. Right, so if you attempt to rotate this, these are all animations, so we're going to visualize. Then it will rotate, we'll try and rotate, this blue driver pin will be in the way and it will stop it. If we were to put the right key in, it would lift the key pin and the driver pin, and the spring would obviously resist, and it would lift it up until this line between the key and the driver reaches this line at the top of the plug. This line is called the shear line, and that line reaches the same as the plug. At that point, the plug can rotate, and in this one pin lock, we have now opened it. All we have to do is lift the key pin to the right height. So one pin lock's not very secure. Yeah, that's an animation showing with a key. Right, it turns out that most locks have more than one pin, although I think I've got some 2 pins here. So this is the sideways view. If you're looking at your transparent locks, you will see that there appears to either be 6 or 7. There is probably, looks like 7, but the 7th doesn't actually exist. It's a pretend one that, just pretend it doesn't exist. There are 6 pins. In this lock there are 5. As you can see, here are the 5 key pins and the 5 driver pins at the top. In those transparent padlocks you're looking at, you will probably initially only be able to see the driver pins, because remember, you can't see anything below here in that transparent. But when you lift up the pins, you don't have to start playing with the transparents, but I know you all are anyway. If you lift up some of the transparent, from the pins, you will see the key pin reveal, because you'll see the little line that shows up. That's that line you want lined up along there. Don't worry, I'll come back and teach you through all of this hollow stuff. We're just going to go through animation. It's awesome. Oh yeah. So when the key goes in, as you can imagine, when a key goes in, I think I did this last time. It totally didn't work. It was funny. So we're going to try it again. Ooh, see it? Here's a key, and I can make the shadows sort of go in the lock. No, so keys obviously have different heights, and so the key cut makes this one rise to this level, this one rise a little bit, this one rise a lot, this one rise even more, and this one rise a middle amount, and the whole thing fits. The keys correspond to the key pin heights. Using a lockpick. Okay, we're not really going to try and show that here. So why is lockpicking possible? Okay, in a perfect world, when you look down on the top of the barrel, and those where these pins are, pin stacks, we're looking down directly on top. In the perfect world, this is a perfect straight line. Manufacturing is absolutely perfect, micron perfect. Nothing ever has got any deviations or damage or anything. And we all live in the perfect world. In the real world, this is what the top of a lock looks like, nice and zoomed in. This is not brand new, but it's not very old. All these little divots and all these dimps and stuff, they're all manufacturing defects. That's what a lock looks like. It's not perfect. The driver pins I was talking about, those nice little blue pins, in the real world, you've got all these little bits and bumps and stuff, and they're just not perfect. That means that, I really need to redo this slide. Imagine that this is much more exaggerated. These holes aren't perfectly aligned. And because they're not perfectly aligned, if we attempt to rotate the plug, only one of those holes will be hit, only one of the pins will hit the hole first, because it's the hole that's the furthest out. And that's going to be what's called, we're going to jump ahead on the slide deck because animations don't work. So one of these drivers will actually be pushed up against first. When you try and rotate, remember I showed that slide where the driver pin was stopping the plug from rotating? Only one of these will bind first because these aren't a perfect straight line. We put our lockpick in, And we go in here with a nice little hook lock pick, the little red-handled one, if you're wondering which pick to use, it's a good one. You go in, you lift it, and because this isn't binding, it'll move up, and it'll come down, and it'll just be springy. That one's not binding, that one's not binding. And as you lift this one here, or whichever one it is in your lock, but every lock's different, you'll lift it up and you'll feel it a little bit tighter, a little bit of pressure, you can feel it sort of drag, and that means that this driver pin is binding. As you lift it up, once it hits that shear line, suddenly click, you feel it, you hear it, depending on the lock, you know, whichever, and depending on your skill set, you can either feel it, hear it, and with the transparency, see it. And the driver pin stays at the top, and the key pin drops down. And it stays at the top because now it's sitting on a ledge, tiny small ledge instead of dropping down. And then one of the other pins will start binding. And you do through it again. And you go through each individual pin. And once you've got them all lifted up, oh, and that reminds me, as you're playing with these locks at the moment as I'm speaking, if you get your padlock open, I want you to, in a nice loud voice, interrupt and just say, open. Open! Excellent. Yes, excellent. If you have opened your lock and you're going, now what I do, cover the lock with your hand so you can't see the pin stack, and then try again. And keep doing it so you can't actually see. You're not cheating. Pretend it's a real padlock. Right, and this is me basically talking about setting and binding, setting multiple pins. Oh yes, overlifting. So, if you go and put the lockpick in and put the tension on, and I'll come back to all this, and then you lift up the red key pin, and that causes the blue to lift, and you keep lifting the red key pin all the way past that shear line, the red key pin will now be jammed up above. So you'll have the spring, the blue driver pin, and then the red key pin. At this point, the red key pin will not drop unless you release the tension and all the pins that you've just set have dropped. Lifting it up above the shear line is called oversetting. Oversetting is really annoying because you sit there and you get it working, you think you've got it perfect and then nothing's working, you're not sure why. So you drop all the pins and you try again and it works and you go, I overset on those pins. Right. Raking tools, I've got some rakes, I can show that later. But effectively, raking is moving backwards and forwards. Yeah, demo, right. So that's the hook. I suggest that you use the hook unless you want to pour the half diamond, which is this one. That's a snake rake, which you don't have. Personally, I prefer the hook. Some people prefer the half diamond. There are techniques for both. What's up, little man? You can't get it open yet? Okay, tell you what, in a few minutes I'll come help you if you'd like, or you can keep reading, I don't mind. I'll come help you in a few minutes, okay? Excellent. Right, half diamond, yes. So, you may have noticed and heard me say that you've got 6 pins in that lock, that's really awesome. However, this lock you don't know how many pins you have in it. So one of the things you can do is take that half diamond, put it in upside down, so the point is stacking upside, just pointing downwards. Lift all the pins up as high as you can. Lift them up and then pull the pick out. And as you pull them out, you will hear the pins drop. And what you're doing there is you're just counting how many pins dropped, how many pins are inside this lock. Because you can't really pick a padlock or any lock until you know how many pins are inside it. Yep. Right, okay, so if you haven't yet worked out that little L bar that's in your pick bag, that's called a tension tool. And if you've been trying to pick the lock without the tension tool, you probably haven't been succeeding. So, that's alright. I've stolen everything I have here. Going well? Thank you, I'm sure I can probably find another one myself. I will be with you shortly, young man. Right. So, tension tool, which is the L shape, it's got a little green handle there. I'm going to put this down and speak. Tension tool, as in this sort of diagram here, goes in like this and turns. Well, you put pressure on, I should say. This diagram is showing a bad form, which is that you're using your thumb to pull. you really want to be using your finger to push, which will be the next slide, which is cool. That's a good way of doing it. You're pushing. You can see the finger here is quite close to the plug, so that's not so great. The best way is to put your finger out as far as you can, just like the person in the photo there. Yeah. Turning pressure, right. So with these padlocks, the transparents, it's actually, you generally speaking, use some pressure, it's probably fine. They are designed to be attacked reasonably easily.
That's for artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's a artificial intelligence. That's a good typo. Good spotting, Batman. Good spotting. You are like the first person.
Open!
Open, yay! Right. So generally speaking, if you're wondering if you're using too much pressure, you are probably using too much pressure. Except with the transparent padlocks you've got here, which as I said are slightly different. With anything else like this, your finger is if its finger is white, it means you've got a lot of pressure on there, and what that's going to do is it's going to cause multiple pins to bind, or it's actually going to cause the pins to jam. Awesome! So, better to have too little pressure. If you have too little pressure and you lift up each of the pins and none of them binds, you can put a little bit more pressure on. If you put too much pressure on, you might overset a pin. We're almost there, almost. Turning tool, I showed you where that was. Yes, the plastics are notoriously bad for this. I've given you turning tools which are which appear to be the right size, but the turning tool, if it's at the bottom of the lock, the metal can actually bind with the bottom of the lock itself, and it can mean that you think you're putting pressure, but instead of putting pressure on the plug, you're simply putting pressure on the bottom of the lock there. The plastics are of course really bad for this, because plastic and metal, turns out metal wins. Which direction should you turn? Okay, so hopefully if you've been playing your transparents, you will know that you turn padlocks to the clockwise or to the right. So padlocks, almost always, I say almost always because like there is that 0.001% of padlocks that don't. Padlocks always turn clockwise. So if you're looking at a padlock, you're wondering which way to open it, it's clockwise. Otherwise, for all the other locks that I've got lying around, they actually open, all the other locks I've got here, the non-padlocks open both directions. When it's mounted on a wall, it depends on how it's mounted, etc. But today, unless it's a padlock, you can open it any which direction. And if you've tried opening a lock and it's not behaving nicely, if you've got one of these and it's not behaving nicely, you can't get it open, try it the other direction, and be easier. Right, so there are only two more things. First one is that lockpicking, you have to relax. Lockpicking is not a high stress activity unless you're in the movies. And the last one is, as this person here wonderfully demonstrated, when you get an open, in a nice loud voice, say open, so that everybody can hear and you can all feel like you're actually succeeding. And that's about the presentation. Now, those of you who have been doing it and have got some opens, look at the person beside you.
Open!
Excellent.
Hey.
Look at the person beside you. If they are maybe not quite holding the padlock in the right way, or maybe that turning tool is in upside down or something, you could totally just help them out and help them figure out which way it needs to go. That would be awesome. Saves me having to get to them. If you've got an open, if you've picked your transparent padlock a few times without looking at the pins, then you can come up. I've got a bunch of other padlocks. We can start giving you more complicated stuff. Hello. You want to come up? Okay. So, does anyone have any...
Open!
Awesome. Actually, I wanted to ask the questions things, but that's going to take ages. People want locks. So we're going to now do the lock exchange stuff and come up and talk to me in a few minutes if you've got questions. Right. Okay. I'm going to pull up the chair. Right.